Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a non-traditional legal program with your host and trusted advisor, Liz Myska, your guide through the web of life's dilemmas.
Welcome to another edition of Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Liz Myska. And today I have the pleasure of introducing my new friend, Tina, and I will let her complete the rest.
Hi, I'm Tina Laffer.
The Carroll Center for the Blind. What can you tell us about the Carroll Center for the Blind?
What is there that I can't say about the Carroll Center for the Blind? I love it there. I call it home. It's the best place I've ever been. It's the only place I want to be. I'm so fortunate to have worked there many years ago and to have been welcomed back in a new role many years later, and it's the best.
So tell us
what is it?
What is it, and what you did before, and what you did.
So it's a rehabilitation center for the blind and visually impaired, and we serve folks of all ages and all stages of vision loss. So whether you are a young student in elementary school out in the western part of the state and need services within your school system, or you might be an older senior citizen who would like to age with grace and confidence in your home and know how to just make your home a little bit more accessible, we can do that as well. And so I love that we serve folks of a variety of needs and ages, and it's just a beautiful place. And we can service you in your school or in your home, or we have a residential, we have dormitories on campus, so folks from out of state or out of country, or even maybe local but have trouble commuting, are able to live on campus and receive rehabilitation services through our independent living program or vocational training programs there. Yeah.
So you said you were there before and now you're back again. So what?
I was. I worked at the Carroll Center from 2014 to 2018, working as a personal management instructor within the the rehabilitation program. And so I was teaching cooking, cleaning, laundry, all the stuff that, you need to learn.
Unnecessary,
right? Like heck with math, heck with science. I have a science degree, so I can say that. Heck with all those things. But how are you cooking? How are you cleaning? How are you buying your groceries or, labeling your medication or, changing your hearing aid batteries or shaving? Maybe you're making a bottle for your baby. How do you do all those skills? That's what I got to teach every day for 4 years, and it was the best thing ever.
Were people reticent to, because they thought they couldn't do it?
Just like I worked with people of all ages. People were everywhere on that spectrum of ready to receive services, not ready to receive maybe the idea of help, or liked their method of doing it, or really weren't ready. And so it was really a beautiful, because those programs are designed for whether it be a 12 or 20 week time, you're able to build a relationship, and maybe those harder skills of something more personal like shaving or doing your makeup can be really hard to accept assistance with. So maybe you start off with something more simple,
I'm just wondering, how are people assessed? Because I'm thinking when I started losing my sight, the determination was made by the Commission for the Blind that I could have, I hate that word, rehabilitation, but I could learn vocational skills or social skills in my own home environment. So I wasn't, and I'm going to use this word, sent. I wasn't sent there. And I guess I always chafe at people. I know that people are evaluating me and saying like, oh, she's got this skill, she doesn't have that skill. We need to work on this skill. So,
and that is actually what it is. And in my new role, so I was a teacher teaching those skills, but now as a director of community engagement and outreach, which is a very fancy way to say that I do admissions and come talk to Liz at a local TV station. So for part of the admissions, when I'm speaking to someone who may be new to vision loss, who aren't sure if this is the right place, all folks come through the program, they start off with a 2-week assessment, and that's really scary. And I say, that's a yucky word.
Yes.
We're not breathing down your neck, looking at every little thing that you do, but you're going to go through a 2-week program participating in all the skills that you would have if you were in a program. And so you're going to have orientation and mobility. You're going to have personal management. And we're not looking to say, oh man, you can't do that.
Right.
Like,
or
oh
wow,
my
you
God,
scored the 100 on that.
And I word it as a way of like MCB or whatever state is potentially saying like, hey, this might be a good idea. Like I'm recommending this, or why don't you give this a try? They're not going to send you if you do a really good job, right? Why are they going to waste money? So
Exactly.
It's not that you want to test poorly, and it's not a test. It's just to see, I like to say it's when you are potentially going to a therapist, right? That first 2 tries that you go, you're seeing like, do I gel well with them?
Right.
Like,
You're feeling them out.
Right? Yeah, you're feeling it out. Do I like it here? Do I feel welcomed? It's the same thing. You might not like us. Maybe you don't like the instructors, which is not going to happen. We're a great people, right? Like, come on, like, we didn't get into this field for money. Like, we got into this field to help people. We're a really great, beautiful team. But maybe you don't like it. Maybe you hate being away from home. Maybe you aren't good at transferring the skills that you learned from one environment back home. Maybe you learn that about yourself, or maybe you realize, God, I only needed technology.
Right.
And then you can come for just a technology training, or you do technology outwear, or you just receive community mobility in your home. And that is what that 2 weeks are for, is to learn more about yourself, about how you work in a group setting. But I think why the residential program or the on-campus training, if you will, is so beautiful is because it's this gorgeous pot of people, right? You got the Liz's, you got folks who you never would have met in your daily life are there experiencing something very similar to you, right? New to blindness.
Right.
And you have people of all walks of life who are coming together to receive services, and many of whom for the first time are saying, my name is whatever, and I'm blind. And that's really hard to say. We recognize that. That is a huge first step. And so during those 2 weeks, they're meeting people who are just like them, who may be at the start of a program, in the middle of a program, at the end of a program, and they can see, God, that could be me in 12 weeks. Oh my gosh, I could go back to work if I come to this program, or I could get a new job, or continue to be a stay-at-home mom with confidence, or stay-at-home dad with confidence. And that's why I think it's a beautiful place. It's home. Many people end up calling it their home, and I feel really blessed to be able to call it that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you fall into this? I mean, you said science degree, so how did this happen, Tina? You took a wrong turn.
I did. I have a degree in geology, so maybe I tripped on a rock or something.
There you go.
I don't know.
Head injury.
Head injury. Yes.
You drank this dream. You're Alice.
So that was one of my undergraduate degrees from Bridgewater State, now University. But I also was studying severe special ed, which is very odd.
Severe
special ed. Yeah, severe special education.
I've never even heard of severe special ed.
Yeah, so when you think of students who might have a moderate disability, it's a learning disability, right?
Okay.
They're in a general ed class, but they receive support from a special educator. So there are some kids with severe multiple disabilities who are in something considered a sub-separate classroom. Okay. And they receive services in a pull-out setting. So instead of receiving algebra, they're doing maybe money math, something on to service them where they are. They're not going to be taking the MCAS, maybe they're taking the alternate MCAS, creating a portfolio. And so that was what I really wanted to do, was to work with kids with severe multiple disabilities and become an educator. And my big focus was, who cares about math and science? And I'm allowed to say that.
I'm with that.
Right? Yeah,
I'm with you.
Who cares? If you are a parent of a student or a child with severe multiple disabilities, don't you care about teaching them how to make their bed? Or how about showering themselves? If something, God forbid, happened to you, who's going to take care of your child? Right. And I remember going, God, I must have been 19, to my professor saying, okay, but I just want to teach activities of daily living. And they were like, no, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, but why? Like, why does that not exist? And so every year from 17 on, I worked at different roles, whether it be therapeutic recreation over the summer or a vocational preparedness summer course, to make sure that I was a well-rounded educator someday. And one day at this one summer camp, I met a kid who was blind. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is wild.
This is different.
I've never met somebody who's blind. And I remember him using his cane. And I was like, buddy, we're coming up to a hose. Step over the hose. And he was like, what's wrong with you? Like, like my cane's gonna tell me that.
Yeah, my cane.
Yeah, of course.
My cane's gonna say, excuse me, there's an object
there's
there, right?
an object here. And I said, yeah, of course. And so we keep going, and he's like, Tina, will you help me with my homework? And he pulls out his Braille.
And you're like,
and I was like, oh my gosh, who am I dedicating my entire life to this field? And I don't know about this whole realm of disability.
Right.
And so at the end of the summer, I had taught myself how to read the alphabet in Braille, visually,
Oh, wow.
of course.
Wow.
And went to my professor and said, how do I learn Braille? And she was like, sighted people don't read Braille. And I was like, okay, well, I already know that that's not true.
Right,
I taught myself
I've already
the alphabet. Yeah. And she was like, well, no, sighted people don't really teach Braille. That's like only taught by blind people. And I was like, okay, well. So I bought myself a copy of a Junie B. Jones book. This is a true story, in print. And I bought myself through like APH or someone a copy of it in Braille, and I interlined it. I didn't know that was the term back then, but I was reading line by line and figuring out this was like a grade 2 level, so there was contractions. I taught myself how to read Braille.
Wow.
I went to, I graduated and learned that there was something called Teachers of the Visually Impaired, TVI. And I was like,
who knew?
All right, well, clearly I'm going into this master's program. I need to know everything there is about blindness. This is my I'm dedicating my life to this. I am enamored with the idea that there's this whole world out there that nobody knows anything about.
Yeah.
And about a semester in, I realized that there was something called VRTs, which is what I am. I'm a certified vision rehabilitation therapist who, the easiest way to describe is I'm like a PT or an OT or a speech therapist, but I'm a VRT. So I'm working on, teaching all the skills that you need to live an independent lifestyle with confidence, grace, and style, right? And sass, if you so choose. How do you do all those skills?
And you
right?
choose.
Yeah, I choose. I mean, that's me. And how do you have that confidence, that individuality? And so I quickly switched from TBI to VRT, and I've never looked back. It's just the most beautiful, beautiful profession, and I'm so happy that this is my trade of choice.
Wow, thank you for taking on the path, because
it's a rocky one, but it's beautiful.
yes,
But
and it has pits and ditches and
a couple garden hoses. But I came here, and I'm so lucky. I wish there were more of us out there.
Absolutely. Well, I think the blindness is, we're like the secret society that nobody wants to join. You don't want to be that. Yeah. The sighted population can identify, oh, that's a blind person. How do you know? They got a white cane. Okay, all right. Or visually, in other words, people may, quote unquote, look blind.
Your disability kind of, says on your behalf or discloses on your behalf.
But it's those stereotypes, and the stereotype that your instructor said, well, sighted people don't learn Braille. Mm-hmm. And you said, why? Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Because I do not know Braille, and I was told by my vocational rehab counselor from the commission, Liz, you're too old. Yeah. And so I chafe at that, because that's ageism.
Yep.
It's like, what does that mean? And basically that means you don't have the tactile sensitivity in your fingers anymore in order to be, adept at that.
Yeah.
But then I kind of turned it around like you're doing, Tina. I'm like, so I'm a bad blind person because I don't know Braille? And it's like, wait a minute. Don't I define who I am? And blindness just happens to be one of my characteristics. But
it's not the only one.
Exactly. And so that's why it's so interesting with human behavior, that we can sign, it's easy to pigeonhole. It's like, oh, this person is, Latinx, or why? Because they either identify that way, or you can see them, and you're like, oh, or they speak a certain language. But another thing that I notice about blindness, because I have a progressive retinal disease, it's hard for blind people to get to know one another. And you pointed that out. Yeah. Well, because we don't know that there are other blind people in the room unless it is a blind function. So there could be blind people, at a conference. I'm a lawyer, so conceivably I could go to a conference for lawyers and there would be other blind people in the room. I wouldn't know that because I can't see them, and they're not identifying that way. And then there's the stigma of identifying that way because society tends to say, well, you're not supposed to be working, you're not supposed to be here, you should know Braille, and so all of these things are superimposed. And that's why a place like the Carroll Center, bringing people who are at the beginning stages, whatever their age of sight loss, and realizing this is just another attribute of mine, and then having them, go forth from that and becoming their own advocates in conjunction with sighted individuals. And that's what I'm trying to do, bringing sighted people, my sighted peeps, into community with us, and then having the sighted and the visually impaired realize there's really no difference between us, other that the VIPs, the visually impaired people, can't see. That's our eyes don't work. That's the only thing. We're people. We've got capabilities. We've got jobs. We've got families. We got we may like to do laundry. We may not like to vacuum. We may, but it's. And that's why, again, at the beginning when off camera you were talking about your parents saying, oh, what you do is amazing. That's also the conundrum for VIPs, for visually impaired people. We're either praised as, you're amazing. No, we're ordinary. We're ordinary. We're doing things, and we're just doing it a different way. Yeah. Or we're pitied. That's the other thing. We're praised or we're pitied. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, it must be awful. Yeah. Now you can't do X, Y, and Z.
You're like, I know. I'm like, lay it on. I know.
But that was my biggest phobia of the big bugaboo for me was I'm not going to be able to drive. And, and it's kind of like, no, I haven't driven for 15 years, but I don't miss it. I had that privilege. I loved to drive, but now I don't, it's not part of my, it's not necessary for me to claim that. And it doesn't diminish me that I don't do that anymore.
And it doesn't define you.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Absolutely. So I want you to, because when I met you,
you met me at Perkins.
I know. I met you at Perkins. Perkins School for the Blind. Yep. Because, again, I was keenly interested in sighted parents of visually impaired kids. Yes. And I think that it's the same thing that you started talking about with, in your journey. I'm a lawyer, and, I'm following people during their life cycle. And for all of us, there's going to come, there's an expiration date, and people, and we're all likely to suffer either a temporary disability or a permanent disability during our lifetime, and we're all going to perish. So, so, and when people, particularly parents of children with disabilities, regardless of the disabilities, the parents have set themselves up as the end all and the be all and the giver, the furnisher of all the services. Well, what if the parent gets sick? What if the parent perishes? Yep. So you have to have a game plan. Yep. And I find, again, whether it's somebody becomes ill, no disability, but someone becomes ill, and I usually call this the decrepit spouse syndrome when it has to do with sight loss. Yes. So when I first started losing my sight, I joined a support group.
So important.
Well, it was on fall prevention and blah, 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 blah. But anyway, I went and I thought, these are all old people complaining about, I can't do this anymore, that anymore. And people would go around the room and, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And so Mrs. Smith, who was decrepit, but she could drive, was bringing Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith was a veteran. Well, what happens, inevitably, and again, we're not trying to be obtuse, but it's like Mrs. Smith dies. Now Mr. Smith has no idea. He doesn't know how to use a microwave. He doesn't, because she has provided everything. I mean, she had taken him to the bathroom. She had, she had fed him and all of these kinds of stuff. Now he's up the creek, and and he's perfectly capable of doing these things, but he never learned these skills.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we
Cut
gently, and so I guess I boomerang it back to you.
Yeah.
You talked about learning skills, but what about the psychological, the dismay of like, I can't see anymore, I can't see as well, or I can't do anything.
Yeah.
How is that addressed?
Because then you got to talk about it from two different perspectives, right? Because it's a grief. It is the death of a sense. And so you are going to go through potentially the same
stages
of loss that you would if you were to lose a loved one, right? You loved your vision. It's gone. It's the death of a sense. And so when we talk about the psychological aspects of vision loss, we're not just talking about the person themselves who's visually impaired, but also the family.
Oh, yes, indeed.
You know what I mean? And that kind of ties it all into like Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith is also grieving.
Yeah. Or resentful. Or resentful.
Right?
Like, this wasn't the bargain.
Right, yeah. That's not the contract I signed when we said I do, right?
Right. I wasn't supposed to be the chief cook and bottle washer and the chaperone and this isn't what I signed up for.
And so, I mean, it's a big, at the Carroll Center, one of the things that we're really big on is that psychological component and the grief and the emotional adjustment to that vision loss. And some people aren't ready in their journey. They need to take some more time to grieve and to think, to be angry, to be resentful, and that's okay. Yeah. You should feel that way. Yeah. This is a huge, huge thing. And I mean, for those of you watching, I am sighted. I can't even begin to imagine, but I understand that is a huge component to be able to be successful in your journey to learn those skills. But it's also a really big journey for the family as well. Because I can say, cut the cord, let them do it. Let them burn themselves a little bit. Right. It's okay. I mean, I'm not saying third-degree burns, but let them have those experiences. Right. Let them struggle. Right. Because those are all learning opportunities.
So let's go back to the kitchen, because I love the kitchen.
I love the kitchen. And I love the kitchen.
We won't get out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
So when I was sighted, I loved to bake, and again, I'm talking in past tense. I still do, but it's much more laborious, and I have to be much more organized. I have to line everything up. Yep. I have to take, like smaller measuring cups if I'm measuring. Say I'm making bread, not from a mix, mind you. I am a purist. I am taking flour and and yeast and all of those kinds of things. But I will like organize. So my point is, it takes me a long time. Yeah. I also make a mess. Yeah. And you had a wonderful the cookie sheet. Let that be your placemat. Yeah. Put everything on there. Absolutely. So that's your barriers. And the person that I went to the conference with at Perkins, where I met you, is my friend Daryl, who also she was a special ed teacher before she retired, and she's been with me when I've cooked before, and she was nudging me, saying, "Yeah, you make a mess when you cook. You need to deploy that technique."
That's a good one.
But and so I give myself the liberty of time. Yes. And I call it maker baker too. So I also try to incorporate the sighted people. So I can't see the oven anymore. I mean I can open the oven door, but I can't see in there anymore. I can't see the timer. Yeah. I can't see the to set the temperature. I can't do those things anymore. So a friend of mine, when I first started losing my sight, we used to make Christmas cookies and everything like that. And then she would be like, "Oh, you're too slow," and it would really offend me. And it'd be like, so I get to watch, and I can't watch. So I'm sitting here in your kitchen just watching stuff. So I'm like, okay, we're going to do maker baker. I am going to mix the ingredients. I am going to measure everything out, put it in the mixer, you, sighted person, are going to, put it into the loaf pan or on the cookie sheet.
Yep.
You, sighted person, are going to actually cook, open the oven and say, okay, they're brown or what, because I can't see those things anymore.
Yeah.
But like a collaboration, and that's why I call maker baker, because I felt annihilated by my friend just like, let's cook, and I'm like, but that's not that's not what is going to happen.
Yeah.
You are going to do it, and I am going to be present, and so I liken that to what you said about family members, because they're looking at, there's a mess, there's a cleanup, there's a, everything is is on the counter, and so to me it's like, you're depriving me of the joy that this brings.
Absolutely. And you should be allowed to make a mess if you want to.
Exactly.
Right? Like, that's your prerogative.
And then you can clean up.
As long as you're cleaning it up, absolutely. It's just, I feel like whatever brings you joy, you should be able to participate in.
Yep. Well, again, I now I pick my battles, and I'm not as, I'm more thoughtful about, or maybe mindful of what I'm doing. And again, the impact that it has on me, but also the impact it has on others, but also the inclusion of sighted and visually impaired, because I think, and you kind of referenced it at the very beginning, there was like a division, there was a separation, that the sighted do this and minister to the blind, but the blind don't reciprocate at all. And now I feel that now's the time that this is starting to happen, and people are being empowered. So we've run out of time. Naturally,
we'll do another one just about cooking.
We will do. Yes, we will.
Yeah.
But any things that just spring to mind, that like a real triumph that you've had, like in the past. Well, I know you just started this position since February. So any like real quick. Now I'm putting you on the spot.
No, you are putting me on the spot. I would say I taught for many years, obviously, until before I came into this role, and I was really nervous, tackling this new position. Right? I define myself as an educator. That's one of my, how I identify myself. Right? I'm a woman, or I'm an educator. Right? We all have those things, and I was nervous about kind of losing that label. And I've realized that I'm still able to empower people over the phone, and I can still have those really beautiful conversations. And I've, never really talked on the phone as a teacher, right? I'm working with kids, but being on the phone and answering these phone calls, and sometimes being the first point of contact for somebody, and just chatting with them and being able to match their mood or lighten their mood, or talk to them about baking, or don't worry, oh my gosh, like, that's what you're worried about? Oh, girl, I got you. Like, you want to learn? Oh, I'll send you all these resources. Has just brought me such joy. And I've met over the phone so many incredible people that some have come to the Carroll Center, and some maybe will come next year, 3 years from now. But just the amount of people that I'm still able to meet and chat with over the phone has brought me immeasurable joy. And I'm really loving it.
Thank you so much, Tina. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Join us for another edition of Connecting the Dots.
Please note that the information provided in this show is not a substitute for consulting with an experienced local attorney and receiving counsel based on the facts and circumstances of a particular transaction. To contact Lizbeth, email her at lizbeth@elizabethlmyska.com or call her office at 508-753-7681. We're online at connectingthedots.lawyer. Executive producers, Liz Myska and Jack Peacock. Producers, John Medberry and Bill Hamilton. A production of Elizabeth L. Myska, JD, LLM, in association with Compliments.